Welcome to our interview with the CEO of Medcan, Micael. This video's been a long time coming, so I apologise for the delays as I've had a cheeky brain operation that delayed things somewhat. It's been a while since we released something like this, so I wanted to get this out there and introduce ourselves to those of you who are new. We produced this interview because we wanted to create a series that helps demystify the UK medical cannabis industry by combining our knowledge of working in this space with supply chain hurdles, compliance and legalities, as well as being a patient myself, seeing a lot of the issues from the patient's perspective. So with this interview, I hope that it helps shed light on what's involved in growing and importing medical cannabis to the UK's medical marketplace. So who are we? We're Infinity CBD. First launched in 2019 at the Hemp and CBD Expo in the NEC, we have since gone on to produce a full line of FSA validated products in our own labs here in Pembrokeshire, ranging from day-to-day supplements to more involved wellness and pampering orientated products. We also provide educational talks and one-on-one training for those wanting to work in the CBD and medical cannabis space, hoping to help expand the UK's medical cannabis industry from the roots up. So without further delay, I want to jump into this interview with you. This was shot toward the end of last year as we finally had a slot available that lined up. So we shot down to London for the day to meet Micael and ask him some questions. Hi, so we're here today in London. We've been invited down to do an interview with Micael from Medcan, just to kind of find out more about what it's like working in this industry from kind of the industry perspective rather than kind of the patient side of things. So thank you for inviting us down. I really appreciate it's been a few months of us trying to line this up, so I'm really glad that it's all worked out. I thought I would just kind of start off by saying, who are you? And what's kind of the background to Medcan?
Yeah, great. So my name is Micael Zollmann. I am the CEO and one of the founders of Medcan. Medcan is a fully licensed indoor cannabis cultivation business. We're based in Johannesburg, in South Africa, and we've been cultivating medical cannabis since 2020. We operate out of a fully indoor facility. It actually used to be a beer warehouse that used to house beer. We converted the warehouse into a fully indoor facility and sort of have been cultivating and exporting cannabis since then.
Wow. So what's the landscape over there like? Is this very much you were the first, or is this like an industry that already exists, or like?
Yeah, so it's a great question. In 2016, a few of us got together and had this crazy idea of starting a medical cannabis business, and the reason for that was someone along the lines he mentioned to my father that they were going to change the law of medical marijuana in South Africa, and then subsequently in 2017 they actually passed the law which allowed a cultivator to apply for a license.
Okay.
So in 2016 we started looking into it, and my background, I'm a civil engineer, and so it was kind of a good use of my skills to sort of try to build or design a facility.
Yeah, nice.
And so in 2016 we set off on this crazy journey of converting a warehouse into this facility. Our partner is a property developer in Johannesburg, and he was the one that had the warehouse, and we approached him with this at the time really crazy out there idea of, let's start a cannabis business with no one having any experience in cannabis prior to this.
Yeah.
And so from 2016 to 2020, it's 4 years spent of essentially converting this warehouse into sort of a GMP, GACP level facility. And then in 2020, the South African Health Authority, SAPRA, started awarding licenses. So Medcan was part of the first batch of licenses that were awarded. I think it was 3 or 4 days before lockdown, like the global lockdown. So we got this license, we were all so excited, and then the whole world shut down, including South Africa. So we didn't do anything with it until about August of that year, where things, like restrictions started loosening a little bit.
Yeah.
As a pharmaceutical regulated company, we were entitled to go to the office, and so in 2020 in the middle of 2020 we began cultivating.
Okay, interesting.
And then we entered the UK market in about early 2021, and sort of have been supplying the UK with our flower ever since.
Yeah, nice. Wow. A hell of a lot of hurdles then, including a global pandemic.
Too many to know.
I mean, that's part of the game, right? I think that's what a lot of people take for granted is a lot of patients see that it's been legal since 2018, that's for ages, but it is not in terms of starting something like this, especially considering your journey started in 2016.
Yeah.
Like, that's 2 years before it was even acknowledged here, do you know what I mean? So, like, yeah, well done, it's an incredible journey to be on. I'm glad that you made it through the pandemic, because I can imagine a lot of people wouldn't have you know, when you finally get that approval and then like within a week that happens, I can't imagine how that felt.
But the irony for us is Medcan was started, I mean, we started the business in 2016 as an idea, but fundamentally it was started during the pandemic in 2020.
Got you. Yeah, okay.
And so, yeah, it's been an interesting time sort of starting a business during a worldwide pandemic and then coming out of the pandemic and seeing things sort of get better.
Yeah.
But it's been interesting.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting journey. The years have felt a lot longer than just years.
Yeah, I bet. Quite a lot of long nights thinking about like obscure compliance issues.
All the time.
Yeah, cool. So explain from a patient to in kind of layman's terms, I suppose, what you've got the facility, you've got your license. Where do you even begin in terms of genetics? Like, what were the key things for you guys when seeking out a sander and kind of?
Yeah, great question. During the 2016-2020 period, when we were building the facility, we weren't only looking at building the facility, we were looking obviously at building our knowledge and kind of understanding what's going on in cannabis, what's the market, what do patients want. And so we looked at, you know, the major markets in the world. At the time, 2016, 2017, the UK wasn't legal, so it was Germany and Israel.
Yeah.
And so when we started looking at those markets, we had a few very interesting conversations with cultivators in these places, and then a lot of researchers as well spent a lot of time. They were very patient with us. And basically the line that we kept receiving was, there's the science behind the plant, and there's what's going on in the research, and then there's what patients want and what's going on in the markets. And they are relatively moving in the same direction, but they are a little bit disconnected at the same time. What's going on in the research is cutting edge stuff. It's really, I've seen it, I've been to these labs, I've seen what they're doing with cannabis, but it's really top end science that hasn't filtered down, let's say, to the patient level.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah. And essentially what the patients were saying was, we just want more THC. And so, or we just want THC.
Yeah.
That was kind of the understanding at the time. It's still kind of a little bit, we're getting a little bit better at understanding the interactions between THC, CBD, or the other cannabinoids, but we're still really early days, right? Patients are still only talking THC, CBD, some are talking about CBG, CBN, but there's like 100. And so when I say cutting edge science that's going on, it's the interactions between those 100, 120 cannabinoids, what's going on in the ratios and what's happening with all the different, what do the different combinations mean and what are the outcomes? That's cutting edge, the kind of stuff that they're doing. And so when we set about deciding what to grow at Medcan, it was, let's grow something that's got a decent amount of THC, because that's what we think patients want. We settled on, our first strain was birthday cake. That was, the genetics were available. We did our own pheno hunt. I think we planted a few hundred seeds, I think even close to 1,000 seeds at the time. We whittled our pheno down, I think at the time, to about 4 different phenos until we settled on one, but we went from literally hundreds of seeds to one. And what they don't tell you when you're starting a medical cannabis business is there's what the market wants, and then there's also what works in your facility. So the birthday cake was very well received. It was a great flower. We worked really hard on it. It wasn't the best to grow in our facility. You know, different facilities have different needs and different areas, and depending on where you are. And so at the time we decided, you know what, the birthday cake's been great, but we need to sort of, not at the time, but later on, we needed to find something that worked for us in our facility, given our setup, given our conditions, given all of these things, which is then how we migrated then to the Tokoloshi sherbet that's available on the market. And it's also how we've decided what we're going to grow next.
Okay.
So now we're a little bit wiser, we're a little bit better at what we do. We can kind of make those decisions and understand, okay, the Medcan facility, these are the types of things that work well in our facility. These are the strains that we should stay away from.
Got you.
And so that kind of informs our decision.
Amazing. I mean, don't have to answer this, but what were those differences? Is this an issue between kind of yield in the environment, or is this just that the plants don't typically do well under?
A number of different factors. I mean, as an example of things people don't appreciate, Johannesburg's close to 2,000 meters above sea level. That's probably got an impact.
Yeah, for sure.
We're not professional scientists as Medcan, but there's definitely some influence. Johannesburg in the summer, although we're an indoor facility, we control to a very as much as we can the air flow coming into the facility and all the conditions.
Yeah.
Joburg in the summer is an extremely humid place, unlike sort of the UK where it's very humid in the winter.
Yeah.
Joburg gets rare. There's thunderstorms in the late afternoon, so we have to consider that in terms of searching for our genetics and making sure that it can withstand these fluctuations. Although it doesn't happen so much in the facility. You know, these are so like those are two just examples of okay, that informs our decision as to what cannabis strains would work best in the facility. I'm sure, you know, if we tried all the different strains, we could probably make them all work. We are still a relatively small business. We don't have the infrastructure to be able to try hundreds of different strains, and so those factors inform our decision.
Amazing. So just going back to Isando then, I know that there's 2 versions available on the market, and that, as far as I'm aware, all patients are told that's strength related. Is that literally so? You know, you're picking out your phenotypes within seeds, and these are 2 separate. Like, what was the intention for that?
Yeah, exactly that. So when we did the Tokoloshi show with Isando TS, we said, okay, let's try to see if we can get a variety or a range of different. The regulation in the UK is what they call the major compounds or the major. I can't remember exactly the term, but you have to measure the THC, you have to measure the CBD, and that's kind of how you categorize your product. So Medcan wants to specialize in THC in high THC flower. So you know, we're looking to deliver flower that's got a lot of THC, and when we were looking at the different phenos, we decided let's try and look at a lower strength and then a higher strength THC. And so it basically comes down to having 2 different phenos of the same strain. One's a lower end, let's say THC, one's a higher end THC. They're both the same strain. They're both grown with the same amount of love and care and quality. They both turn out really, really well. That's what it comes down to, is the different levels of THC.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, I'm on the 19. I have a stronger THC option for evenings, but the 19 for me in the day has been consistent for I don't know now how long.
Great to hear.
But yeah, no, it's interesting to have those choices, and it would be interesting to compare the 2 at some point down the line. So that's interesting. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. What's the next question anyway? You mentioned already that you've been looking at the strains. Is this something that you can talk more on, even if it's just about what you'd be looking for, rather than naming anything?
Yes, I can't name it because it's in the works, and hopefully it turns out okay, and that's the plan. But you know, cannabis, things happen.
Nature
happens. Yeah. Although indoor facility tries to mimic nature, but things happen in the cannabis industry. Again, we're looking for a strain that's, you know, packed with THC, packed with flavor, packed with different range of terpenes. So when we made the decision for this one that we were looking for a little bit of a let's say we were looking for reputable genetics. We did a deep dive into sort of the UK market and what do patients want. We did go out there and ask patients, like, what do you want, what's important. We looked at what the market had at the moment. We looked at what we think the market may be receptive to. And when I say the market, I remember obviously referring to the patients, right? So what do the patients want? What will they be receptive to? What's missing perhaps? And what's really important is what are reliable genetics, you know? It takes, best part is probably going to take us 9 to 11, 12 months to get this strain up and running. And so when you want to start with something that's, you know, that you can rely on the genetics, because if you're not being able to rely on the genetics, you're going to get 7 months in and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, these genetics are terrible, the flower's not turning out right, the plants are, you know, they're not delivering what we need them to deliver. So one of the first things we did was we went out there and said, okay, who can we rely on for genetics? And then Medcan does its own pheno hunting. So every strain that we grow, we procure the seeds, and then we would plant out the seeds, run through the different phenos from the different seeds, and then say, okay, we like this one because it's got these traits. We've got like a whole long list, like tick boxes. At the end, you send it obviously all for testing. You test all the different phenotypes, cannabinoid level, terpene levels, the different microbial contaminants. Obviously pesticides, we don't use any pesticides, but so you do all those tests, and then based on all the characteristics, you say, okay, we like this pheno, let's go with that. And so Can't name too much. Can't say too much about the strain, but we're hoping sometime next year, hopefully the middle of next year, we'll have a new version of Isando. So the version at the moment is Isando TS, and then we'll bring on like a different Isando.
Interesting. Okay, so once you've selected your phenotypes, or at least isolated the selection, are you then, I guess, are what we're receiving as patients clones from those phenotypes? So you still going from CT?
So all the products that we deliver will be from
those. Makes sense.
And we'll keep our own mother stock and.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so when I first heard about you guys, it was a news article, which I'm guessing would have been, you said 2021 is my birthday, so it would have been not long after I'd become a medical cannabis patient. More so than the now what I'm about to speak about was a big issue, although it's still a big issue that you see a lot on the boards. And this is in terms of irradiated cannabis. And that's what piqued my interest, was a lot of the stuff at the time. It was a very small selection. I think maybe we had like 10 to 12 things we could choose from. My experience with a lot of them were very muted, effective, but very muted. So seeing the birthday cake being non-irradiated was a huge plus. It was something that I pursued. But it raised a huge question for me. It was like, well, if you're managing to do it, why is this something that other people seem to,
Yeah.
And from my understanding, working in a lab, trying to do things that ISO standard and working in the MRHA, the assumption is that it's a risk factor in terms of other things, but perhaps you guys have nailed it in terms of, what was it that made you guys go that route? Is there certain hurdles that this has imposed on you, or?
Yes. So patients are aware that there's kind of when it comes to medical cannabis, there's kind of two standards that operate in the UK, from my understanding at least. There's the Pharmacopoeia 5.1.4, and then there's European Pharmacopoeia 5.1.8, and where they differ majorly is on the microbial contamination, as you said. And it mostly comes down to total aerobic microbial contamination and total yeast and mold counts. And those are the two sort of areas that they differ majorly by factors. And so we hold ourselves, our importer holds us to the standard of 5.1.4, which means that your contamination count or your total yeast and mold has to be extremely low, like really, really, really low. And as a business, we think that we can differentiate ourselves by meeting those standards. If you don't meet those standards, then the way to meet or to reconcile those standards is to irradiate. Which a lot of other flowers have to go through that sort of post-harvest process of irradiating the cannabis, then testing it afterwards and making sure that it hits these standards. How do we go about it? That's our secret sauce. No, in all seriousness, we're a craft cultivator. So if you look at other cultivators all over the world, especially since we're indoor, we're not this huge operation. Yes, we're an industrial size operation. We're operating out of a warehouse, but we don't have thousands and thousands of plants going on at any given time. You walk into greenhouses and you literally can't see the end of the greenhouse because there's so many plants. And so while our size inhibits us to grow huge quantities in any given batch, it does allow us to sort of take the care and the time with the plants that we need. And I think that is one. I think that is one factor. I think the fact that we've got a fewer number of plants in a room at any given time, there's less chance of things going wrong. That's kind of where the team sits in terms of thinking, how are we achieving these? Well, what's one of the ways that we're achieving these goals? We don't allow any visitors to Medcan. So we're very strict when it comes to you're welcome to come to our offices, you're welcome to come and have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, but no one's allowed in the flower rooms unless you're part of the cultivation team. And culturally, I think that's another big thing, is like the less pathogens, the less people you're bringing in at any given time, the better. You have to get, as I'm sure you've seen in other facilities, you have to get like fully dressed in gowns and decontaminate yourself and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things is when people ask, can we come see the facility? Yeah, you're welcome to come see it. You can look on the cameras. Like, you're not going into the flower rooms. So I think the size is a big deal. The craft cultivation side of it. I think the culturally, making sure that our employees know how to go in and not allowing visitors is another factor. And then there's a few things in between that we were sort of strict on in terms of how we look after our plants, what technology we're implementing. But we're holding ourselves. We're gonna, for as long as we can, we're gonna hold ourselves to those standards. The way I explain it to people, and patients may not appreciate this, is it's kind of like when you were at university and you're going through the semester and you're studying all semester, or you're trying to study all semester, and then you come and you write the exam and you just hope and pray that you passed or you got the marks that you want. So like at Medcan, it takes us 3 months to cultivate a crop. We then send it for this robust analysis and testing, and it's really like you wait for 2-3 weeks before you get those results, and you're like, you really hope that the work that you did in those 3 months pays off.
Yeah.
Because you can't see it, right?
No, exactly. Yeah.
So that's kind of the analogy that I give people when it comes to how stressful it is.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that I see a lot is that I speak to a lot of people, and some people are those that either know someone or have been a bit naughty themselves and know a little bit about cultivation, and in their head it's just like, well, if I can do it or someone I know can do it, it's easy. And I'm like, yeah, but repeat that with 200 or 1,000 pounds or whatever it is consistently, and then try and meet all of these things. It's just a different ball game altogether. So I think it's nice to hear you talk about it that way, and considering that you know, I see you guys are a big player in this industry, to still keep that craft side of it and have that attention to detail is admirable. So thanks, appreciate it as a patient, because it shows in the product. And when I first did get prescribed it, there was a stark difference in terms of what was like left, so to speak, in the pack compared to like other strains that I tried. So
that's good. Yeah, listen, as a business, our goal is to deliver a high quality premium product, craft cultivation. You know, we want to deliver it. We want patients to know that it's been well looked after, it's been well treated, it's given the attention that it needs. And so that's the Medcan sort of ethos, or our culture, is to deliver like a really high quality product and give it as much care and attention that it needs.
Nice. I'm very excited about the new strain. I wish I knew more.
But we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, so for those in the UK, I mean, obviously you started in a completely different environment, but would you have any advice for anyone in the UK who is looking to work in this industry, whether that's where do they begin and what would you be looking for? Obviously, there's so many different roles within it, but you know, if we get asked most about cultivation, so I guess what were you looking for when you were looking for people to work in your facility?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I actually asked my team this question. I said, because you know, the team's the team, they're working in the industry, and what's interesting is that none of the team had a background in cannabis cultivation. So our head of cultivation, he's got a BSc in plant sciences. So he loves plants. He goes home and spends as much time at home with his plants as he does at Medcan. But you know, we've got a guy on site, a site engineer, no background in cannabis whatsoever. Was interested in cannabis, but no background. And so that goes. Our pharmacist also. He was working in the oncology department in a very large hospital in South Africa. I think the largest hospital in the southern hemisphere. But also no background in cannabis. So you don't necessarily have to have a background in cannabis in order to sort of participate in the industry. On the I mentioned our head of cultivation. The rest of our cultivators also came from no cannabis background whatsoever. I think what we look for in the team is, you know, someone that's willing to learn, someone that's smart. Obviously, I'm an engineer, so I like other engineers because I find it easier to get along with. You think the same way. That's just my personal preference. That's not an industry preference. I think. I don't think you need a background in cannabis in order to get into this industry. Obviously, if you want to work with the plant, then having some sort of plant background does help, right? Yeah. Having an interest in plants or a passion for plants and being like enjoying spending time with plants really, really helps. Of course. You know, sometimes we have to pry our cultivators away from the plants because they just want to spend so much time with it. Guys, go home. Yeah. But yeah, there's no stock standard. It depends, right? Like. I'm talking about it as a cultivator. There's a various amount of different businesses along the supply chain. So obviously, if you want to go work in a pharmacy that's dispensing cannabis, you probably need some sort of pharmaceutical background. Yeah. But as a cultivator, we just look for people that have a thirst to learn more, are really smart, passion to work. One of the challenges with cannabis cultivation, and we get asked this often by potential recruiters, can I work from home? And like, you know, we've got literally living, breathing plants in our facility. So working from home is kind of hard. Probably not going to work, especially when it comes to like the cultivation side. Obviously, there's the administrative business side of things where maybe it's a little bit more flexible, but we do like people to be on site, and so there's that element to it. But yeah, to summarize, I don't think you necessarily need any background. I think just a thirst for knowledge and a passion for the thing.
That's good to hear. I think that's kind of, I get asked that a lot, but I'm just like down here running my own CBD lab, so it's a different ballgame, but that's kind of the same answer that I've had in the past, which is that, my background's film production. I'm not supposed to be running a lab and doing any of this, but if you've got the passion to pursue that and the interest to kind of keep you there whilst things are hard and you're just learning your way up, then I believe anyone can do it. It's just believing or knowing how to find that.
Because I think people in the UK are a bit limited because obviously there's very few cultivators. Starting to see a few more come online, and it's very regulated here. And so I think the opportunities here are perhaps more specialized. Let's say, you want to work for a clinic, you want to work for a pharmacy or an importer. Maybe in the next year or two we'll see some jobs coming up available at different cultivators. Yeah. But for now, it feels like it's in much more. The availability of jobs is in the more regulated side of things.
Yes, this is it. Yeah, so it will be more specialised. And I think that's what a lot of the patients do understand is like, if there's going to be a bit of time before this is more readily available, what can I be doing now? And generally I'm saying the same thing, which is like, look to see if you can get a qualification that's related to where you want to be, because that can only help, right? But a lot of these individuals are already passionate enough to have that basis. So unfortunately in the UK it's waiting a little bit and networking really.
But also cannabis is like any other business, right? Like you need accountants, you need finance people, you need sales people, cannabis is not only about growing, cultivating the plant. So there is that also available.
It's true. Good, thank you. I guess this kind of goes back to cover some of the ground irradiation kind of process and stuff like that. But from a patient's perspective, how do I explain this a bit better? So in my job, I work in the lab, but I'm also customer facing and in educational talks. So I get asked quite a lot from people from all backgrounds. A lot of our customers are people who have already used cannabis before and are going into getting prescribed, and they know their stuff already. But also a lot of people are coming from this having heard about it but never used it before. And one big hurdle that I see is that they'll go online and research it, and then because certain forums online can kind of be a bit biased in some respects, some are almost scared away from it because they're hearing all these horror stories about how bad the mold situation is, and all these kind of conversations. And I spend a lot of time navigating that and kind of explaining and saying it's like anything, you're going to see the bias of more negative reviews about certain things in one place than you would in others. So it's hard to kind of bridge that and explain to people what the actual hurdles are, why they might find that, as you've already answered really well with the irradiation thing, why people at scale choose to do that, because obviously it makes sense as a business at that scale. But other hurdles for you guys bringing things into the UK that people aren't necessarily aware of beyond just that microbial count? What's the typical kind of challenges that you face?
Yeah, so it's extremely strict when it comes to bringing product into the UK. And I don't think anyone, your comment, I don't think anyone consciously chooses to have to go and irradiate their product. I think, there are standards and you need to meet the standards.
Yes, yeah.
One of the tools that a cultivator may have in their possession is being able to irradiate the flower process. But there's a lot of challenges when it comes to importing. The biggest challenge is you have to meet the standards. And the standards, the set standards are very, very high. And I think patients complain about it, but I do think that is to the patient's benefit, right? Like as a patient, you are receiving a product which has met standards, has been tested to those standards, and that makes it safe. Or it makes it a lot safer, let's say, than getting your product elsewhere. And so it's a hurdle, but it's also to the patient's benefit, although some patients may not agree.
Yes.
But that safeguard and those standards exist in order to be a safeguard to the patient to ensure that nothing, at the end of the day, the way that the patients are consuming this flower, right? You're inhaling it, it's going straight into your bloodstream. Yeah. If there is anything wrong with the flower, you are at very high risk because it's going straight into your bloodstream. I'm not a doctor, but if you think about it logically, you're inhaling it, it's going straight into the blood. It's not like you're ingesting it maybe via these pastils, different, maybe via oil. It's a different sort of mechanism to the body. But my understanding is most patients are inhaling the flower, and so by inhaling it, it's going straight to the blood, and that poses much higher risks than say eating it or ingesting the product, right? Yeah. And so the biggest challenge is meeting the standards every time. Yeah. There's other challenges, obviously. How do you get cannabis? How do you get this flower from where it is to the patient or just into the country? There's those challenges. How do you make sure that it's safe, that it maintains the temperature that you need it to maintain?
Yeah.
That it's...
Okay, no, I think you covered that really well. I think it's just, you see the same things coming up a lot of the time, and it's sometimes hard to empathise when things seem to always go, because I'm presuming that it's like a negative intended thing, and I'm always on the other side of that going, well, as a business, all of these importers, all of these producers want the same thing, whether they're very business-minded or more of the craft approach. Everyone wants the business to be successful, so actually why would they be trying to do things that are, limiting things on purpose? So it's a nice opportunity for someone in your position to basically explain that.
Yeah, our goal, obviously, our goal as a business is to deliver the best product we can to patients.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what we set up Medcan for. Our goal has always been to give as many patients, or to have the access to as many patients as possible. That's why Medcan is sort of an independent cultivator. Any clinic, any pharmacy, any patient that wants our product has access to our product, they can get it. And so, yeah, our business has been set up in order to deliver the best that we can to the patient. There are steps along the way that, I'm not going to say curtail that or hold us back, but there are certain challenges. You have to meet certain criteria, and in order to meet those criteria, sometimes there's a bit of give and take when it comes to different things. But our goal always is to deliver the best product to the patient, and if that's what we'll continue to try to do. Yeah.
Perfect. So I'll lead into the community-led questions that people submitted. I know, like I said, this might not necessarily relate specifically to you guys, so I don't know if you answer it more as your view on these questions rather than something you can relate to, or move past the question if it doesn't quite apply. But these are literally as they were asked. So, so the first one was, I would like to hear about their thoughts on microseeds and ovules, what exactly they are, what impacts they have on medication, and how prevalent they are, or their experiences with them. Just for quick context, although I'm sure you know this, there's been a few strains that have been popping up that people have found a large amount of these ovules and seeds in, and I've seen frustrated responses from patients who have asked about it and have heard from one department, yes, these are microseeds, there's nothing to worry about, and then other departments saying that's not what they are, that's, and they're getting conflicting information. So I guess this may not, I don't think this is an issue I've ever seen with you guys at all, so I don't know if it applies, but have you encountered any challenges like this yourself? Is this something that you're aware of?
So the first to one of your points is, as a patient, if you receive medication, I think first port of call is always to talk to the people that you receive the medication from, so that may not necessarily be the cultivator, but the dispensing pharmacy who may relate you to the clinic that you got the medication from, or the importer. But it's important as patients to sort of follow the official channels, let's say, because I think that way you'll get the best answer, because things will get pushed up and the relevant people will be copied in, and then rather than trying to we've seen patients, like, even we are active on social media, I think many people know this, and oftentimes we advise patients, like, we're happy to deal with this, but you need to, when they've got a query, they've got a question, so you need to go through official channels. So that's my first top tip to patients. In terms of the microseeds and seeds, so the rules no longer allow for seeds to be in flower, so that rule changed, I believe, last year sometime, middle of last year. That's the new pharmacopoeia standards for cannabis flower, or for flower, I'm not sure exactly which. In terms of microseeds, listen, seeds are a challenge for any cannabis cultivator. Obviously you don't ever want them to appear, that's not the goal. As a patient and as people that have cultivated cannabis before, they may appreciate this. In order to get the best results from your plant, you stress it towards the end, right? Like, so these plants are going under significant stress towards the end of their, let's call it, life cycle before you harvest them. And like humans, you get stressed, crazy things happen. And so there may occur, I'm talking about from another cultivator's point of view, that you may see this occurrence. It's usually, when there's microseeds, it's usually because of some sort of stress in the environment and the plant. And the challenge as a cultivator is that you can't open up the flowers, each and every flower, and look for these microseeds, right? So it's probably your worst nightmare as a cultivator to get microseeds, because you're not going to spot them, or you probably won't. You'll spot maybe a few, but you're not opening up the flower, because then the patient's going to receive like ground flower at the end of the day, right? And our goal is to deliver whole flower.
Yeah.
And so it's a challenge. It really is a challenge for a cultivator. The thing that we try to do at Medcan is obviously maintain constant environments, stress the plant as little, give the plant the ability to bring out the best towards the end through stress, but also make sure that the conditions are right and that there's no other things that the plant has to worry about.
Great. Yeah.
And that's what we try to do in an indoor facility. It's probably a little bit more difficult in sort of a greenhouse or outdoor or hybrid solution where you're not controlling, let's say, as many elements. But yeah, it's a problem. But not a problem. It is a function of the plant at the end of the day.
Yes.
You buy raspberries, raspberries have seeds. You buy apples, apples have seeds. Cannabis is a plant at the end of the day. It's a flower. It shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does.
Yeah, that's a perfect answer. I think that's might be my stance, and I'll put my hand in the air to say that I understand how, I know that some under stress, they can have that, and this is typically how this kind of thing can happen. But I was surprised to see the disdain online in terms of what that meant, or whether it was a risk, or whether, all these other things. And as you say, I was like, it's a natural product. I mean, this is one of the hardest things, even. So from our perspective as a CBD producer, we're in a very easy, simplistic thing where we're doing our tests and we're trying to monitor one thing, and it's an oil that's already extracted, so all the variables have been taken out of it, and we've just got to meet that standard. Whereas a natural product, that's just all out the window. You can do your best, and it sounds like that's where you guys are, is you've optimized being able to produce this the most amazing setup, but it's nature. It'll find a way every now and again, like you say, unless you open it all up or everyone wants granulated flour, like there is no other way around it. And if there's a strain that's happened to show an abundant amount of them, that doesn't automatically mean that the whole batch is going to be the same, or even future products. So it's nice to hear that, from that perspective, that it is just what it is. It's a natural product, and everyone's doing their best to avoid it. But there's only so much you can do to spot it, in there without destroying the end product. So.
And the patients should rest assured that every product is tested, like I mentioned before. In order to get into the country, it has to be tested, and it goes through a myriad of different tests, and that's on a batch per batch basis. So yes, it's not nice to receive the flower like that, but they can still rest assured that what it says they've received is what they've received. So
exactly.
If that's any consolation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you say, the official channel route is great, and it's definitely the way to go.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one up was, I would like to know why so few balance strains are available. Now, obviously, from your perspective as a cat crop producer, you're very much focused on your phenotype and where you are now. But imagining you weren't in the position where you're exploring a new strain right now, is that something that you could comment on, or is this something that's in the pipeline in your mind down the road?
Yeah, so the rule at the moment in terms of the label, let's call it label requirements in the UK, is that you're allowed a discrepancy or a variation of plus minus 10% either way on your major compounds. So if you've got a 20% THC flower, you can go plus minus 10% on that per batch. So you could have a batch that's harvested at 22%, that's the upper limit, and then 18% would be the lower limit. Now, what you see on the markets is you usually have a CBD flower or you have a THC flower, because it's hard enough to keep your bands or to keep your batches consistent for one of those compounds, one of the cannabinoids. The minute you start doing a balanced flower, like a 10-10, 20-20, I don't know what the balance ratios are, you now have to hit the mark on both of those. And if you're trying to harvest a 10-10 THC CBD, if your THC is more than 11, but your CBD is still 10, your flower is no longer balanced. You're no longer bringing that in as a balanced flower.
Got you.
And so the biggest challenge from our point of view, I don't know about other cultivators, but we've spoken about it at length at Medcan, is it's going to be very difficult, because from batch to batch, the variation, listen, you keep it tight, but at the end of the day, you even said it's plant. Yeah. And so we're indoor, we're controlling our environment, we're controlling all the elements, and still there's going to be a little bit of variation. And so to hold yourself to that band is very difficult, which is probably why, from my point of view, there's not many, if any. I don't know, are there any balanced flowers?
There's a few.
Okay.
But in my experience, they pop up,
go out of
and
stock.
they disappear.
Exactly.
Yeah, and now that makes sense. I've never considered it from that perspective.
That's probably the major reason. There's probably other reasons in terms of the
Yeah.
phenos and the strains and the procuring the genetics, but the biggest thing is that you have to hold yourself to this variation of the label, of your label,
Yeah.
and so per batch, is that really something that you want to do?
You've got two moving targets instead of one, basically. Yeah, I in my ignorance, I just assumed they'd kind of either both be over or under. But see,
Who knows?
Well, this is it, yeah. So I guess I hadn't considered environmental factors affecting one over the other or anything. Interesting. Okay, thank you. That was a good question by then. So the next one is, during transportation for distribution, are climate-controlled containers used? Asking as it really can't be helped if shipment is left to cook in a customs warehouse.
Yeah, so this is a great question. So similar to patients, many patients they know about GMP, so good manufacturing practices. There's GDP, which is good distribution practices. Okay. So there are standards again when it comes to transporting cannabis, and so our cannabis is shipped ambient is the term. So it has to be below, usually between the band of 15 to 25 degrees. So it can't go above 25 degrees. If it goes below 15 degrees, cold temperature not such a big deal. But obviously you don't want to freeze it. But so in terms of the distribution, we track our product. So we know at any given time where the product is. We know the temperature. We know the humidity. We know the light. So if the box is open or closed. So we track all of that kind of stuff in real time, and so yes. So the patient asked if the flour cooks. If your flour goes, let's say your goods go above those bands, then you're gonna have a very hard time justifying and getting the product through QC on the site.
Interesting.
So there are standards again that the flour is held to.
So those. Not your standards. These are standards by the UK.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, okay.
Well, it's also pharmaceutical standards, right? If you go to the pharmacy and you buy something off the counter or by prescription and it says store between 10 to 20 degrees, in order to get there, right, into your pharmacy, it wouldn't make sense if it was stored above 20 degrees because they're telling you to store it below 20 degrees.
Yeah.
So when you're transporting, you're having to hold yourself to the same standard as what it says on your sort of storage, on your label.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so it's almost as if whatever you do, however you're storing it in the warehouse, is how it has to be stored during transit.
Yeah.
And so ours, it gets put into the pharmaceutical locker on the aeroplane. It's stored ambient when it's waiting to get onto the aeroplane. The minute it hits the UK, it's put into the fridge. All of these kinds of things to ensure that the temperature never spikes and it's always kept at the temperature. The other part of the question was, does it sit and cook? No. If it has sat and cooked on the tarmac or in the warehouse, or you're not receiving that product.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to get it through quality. They may, I don't know. We wouldn't be able to get it through quality.
Yeah. Well, that's reassuring to know. I wasn't sure how. I mean, it makes sense from the pharmacy example you gave that these are already in place regardless of cannabis being legal. Or not.
Any medicines, licensed, non-licensed, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
It's the same as your fruit and your veg that you buy in the supermarket, right? It's sitting in the fridge. Your milk sits in the fridge. It wouldn't make sense if they transported your milk in a van that wasn't temperature controlled.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. Cool. Thank you. So, next question. I'd like to ask how many medical patients are actually employed in the production business, if any, as I feel these patients would have an idea of what is actually acceptable medicine. Obviously, production is external to the UK for you, so this doesn't actually think, but I guess you've got staff here in the UK or... So
we're very lean. We've got no staff in the UK, so I'm based in London, but we've got no other staff in the UK. We've got all of our staff based in Johannesburg. How many patients do we employ? There's no medical cannabis industry, or let's say there's no patient. There are loopholes that exist in South Africa in order to sort of become a patient, let's say, because there's no law that allows you to be a patient, as far as I'm aware.
Okay.
You can make special applications and get the medicine prescribed sort of as a last resort.
Okay.
So that's the loophole. But as a result, there's not many patients that you see in Johannesburg. And so, it's hard to answer that question.
That's fair enough. No, that's fair enough. Okay, so it's a big one. I would like to know about what analysis is done on degradation, isomerization, and cyclization products.
Pass.
this is a very technical question that obviously is a very specific job. Yeah, that's fair enough. Next one would be, I would like to see a limit on time between curing and packing and the flower being available to buy. A year since harvest is way too long in my books. Though not a question, your thoughts on this would be insightful.
Yeah, so just to give insight into the process. So we harvest our flower, it cures or dries for 2 weeks, usually 40 days, and sort of in a specific room that's been set aside for drying. So we call it the drying room.
Makes sense.
So it sits in the drying room for 2 weeks until it reaches sort of the level of moisture that we need it to reach. Then it gets trimmed up. It usually takes about, depending on the batch, between 7 to 10 days of trimming, and that's hand trimming only by individuals, obviously. So it's 7 to 10 days of trimming. Then it gets put into the buckets to cure, and then it sort of, once the trimming's finished, it gets sent for testing. So you're already, let's say, 3 weeks post-harvest at this point in time.
Okay.
All done, obviously, in a temperature-controlled environment, temperature-controlled facility, light-controlled facility, humidity-controlled facility. So it's sort of the perfect conditions for the flower to be.
Yeah.
So what are we, 3 weeks? Then you've sent it for testing. Testing usually, depending on the types of test, the microbial tests take a lot longer because they have to plate it and make sure that no coliforms are forming.
Yeah,
that takes longer than, say, the cannabinoid. Sometimes you can turn that around in 2 to 3 days. But let's say 2 weeks for testing. Mm-hmm. So you're now about a month and a half out from harvest. You could probably then just justify an export because you've got your COA, it's passed your QC, you've cleared the batch, it's been you've filled in your conformity, and you're happy to go. That's probably the quickest turnaround time that you could possibly get. But then you've got an import permit that you need to get, you've got an export permit that you need to get. You can only get the one once you've got the other, depending on the different jurisdictions.
So you have to do this every batch?
Yeah, every batch.
What?
Yeah, every batch. There's no blanket import export. Every time a product leaves South Africa, for us, it's an import permit, it's an export permit, it's a batch clearance, it's a certificate of analysis, every single batch.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
the COAs and stuff makes sense. I thought it would be more of a process that was set up for you at that point.
No. There's no blanket allowance. Also, in terms of, I think there's some sorts of, in terms of the UN and the proceeds of drugs and making sure that drugs cross borders, I think cannabis is still considered a drug in that sense, globally. And so there is sort of, my understanding is there is communication between the different authorities around the world with the UN in terms of, here's how much cannabis is moving from this place to this place, to this country to this country. So there's all those kinds of things. But so what did I say? We were about 5-6 weeks. We haven't done anything. We've just harvested the flower, trimmed it, sitting, curing, ready to go. Yeah. But there's nothing. And so possibly the quickest turnaround time is maybe, I'd say, a month and a half, 2 months, because now you're waiting for the import, the export. I know for us, export permits usually take about a month. And in order to apply for that export permit, you need the import permit from the importing country. In order to do that, you need to have cleared the batch. So the patient needs to appreciate that there's certain things that you just can't do until you have the previous sort of step complete. Yeah. And so you should. A year's a long time, but we try to get our product into patients' hands as quickly as possible. Obviously, it also depends on how many patients are being prescribed your product, how much stock there is, how much from that batch, how quickly it's been going, and so all of these things are factors.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, I had no idea. I mean, I knew the COAs and everything would have to be in place for QC, but so when it clears QC on UK side, that's packaged though, right? That's split into the.
Yeah, to an extent. It's also a case of, okay, well, how much do we have from the previous batch? How many patients do we foresee the next few weeks? When do we want to package this? All this kind of stuff.
Interesting.
But all of these are steps in the process that when you hear the patient say, oh, why is it taking so long? This is the reason why it's taking so long.
And to be honest, I think out of everyone, you sound by far going to be the fastest on that side of things. I think this mainly comes from patients who have perhaps had a batch arrive with 20 days left until the expiry, and they're just like, why? And then but that's certainly not something I've ever experienced.
Yeah, but oftentimes the 20 days will not have been. It's not been imported with 20 days to go.
Well, this is what I mean, is that they're obviously on a strain that's been in much larger stock level. It's been there for a while, perhaps. Or passed around. So whereas that is as well, whereas definitely not the case with you guys. Okay, so we've got one more community question. You've actually covered a lot of this already. So this person is asking for basically lists of specific pesticide products, which you said you don't need, and practices used explicitly, not just COA-related responses. Those just use the existence of regulation and compliance with them as marketing ammo, which also depends on regulatory examinations and requirements keeping up when they are always a catch-up game in the industry. I guess what they're asking is beyond just trying to hit those THC levels, like, do you guys use any pesticides, and are there other kind of controls in place that you haven't already covered?
Yeah, so the controls are basically the standards that are in place in order, once you need to test your product, those standards exist in order to make sure that you haven't used anything. So the pesticides example, I think it's Pharmacopoeia 2.8.13, if I'm not mistaken. So if you Google pH 2.8.13, it'll literally come up with the list of pesticides that you need to test for in order to pass. And you cannot get cannabis. Your flower will not be allowed onto the market. Be available to patients unless you have. And the limits on those pesticides, it's basically zero.
Yeah.
You cannot use any of those pesticides, and so we don't use any of those pesticides. Of course, we don't use any of those pesticides. We don't use any pesticides. Full stop. If they wanted to add more pesticides to the list, they could. As an indoor cultivator, we're able to. I'm not going to say it's a little bit easier because we've got many other challenges because we're an indoor cultivator, but because we're indoor, we can afford to not use the pesticides and try other ways and means of sort of avoiding these contaminants. So we're very big on our biologicals that we use. We use predatory mites, we use insects, we use some sprays very early on in the cycle of the grow that are all biological, organic, and so it's all natural.
Yeah.
But because of that, the plants are slightly more at risk towards the end of getting. So you really, again, like I mentioned, no visitors, really good cultural controls. You really have to be on the ball in order to, because you don't have let's call it the luxury of pesticides. And the reason that the food's got pesticides is something we spoke about earlier. You're eating the food, you're not inhaling your food.
Yes.
If you were inhaling an apple, they wouldn't be able to put pesticides in that apple.
Yeah.
Right? So here you've got a product that you're inhaling, it's going again into your lungs. And so you really have to be stringent with what you can and can't use. And so the fact that you can't use pesticides is a really good thing.
Yes.
It makes life as a cultivator really more challenging, but the plant, the flower, is way more secure, or let's say way safer.
Yes.
Something that patients may not appreciate if they find their flower from a different source.
Yes.
So the rules and the regulations exist in order to make sure that we're doing the best for the patient.
Yeah.
And I kind of like that in that you've got this product, you send it for testing, you can rest assured that you've passed all of these tests, the patient is safe.
Yeah.
Like anyone consuming your product, you know that you've done your duty in ensuring that they've got a safe product in their hands, and that, things will not go wrong.
Yes.
Right? Whereas if you're sourcing your product from elsewhere and those people or whoever you're getting your product from is not holding themselves to those standards, then
Yeah, exactly.
So just to go back to the question, if they Google the list of pesticides, they'll see all those lists of pesticides. At Medcan, we don't use any pesticides.
Yeah.
We love our predatory mites. We love our insects.
Yeah.
We love our biologicals.
Yeah.
And so that's all the stuff that we use at Medcan.
That's good to know, because I guess if you were to be using some pesticides but had controls in place to remove that risk, so to speak, it's still that thing, unless you're testing every single plant or bud, you might show zero on some, but there's always that risk factor.
No, you can't. You can't. At the end of the day, it's going to show up in the tests. There's no ways that you can try to pull the wool over anyone's eyes when it comes to your testing, and that's the purpose of these regulations and these rules. That's why you have to test your flower at the end of the day to make sure that you haven't. There's no getting around it.
Yeah, good.
And so it's fine. We hold ourselves to those standards, and those are the standards we'll continue to meet.
Perfect.
Yeah. Is that helpful?
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Yeah?
Yeah, you're really spot on. I think, it's just a very unique opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, about what these challenges actually are. And obviously a lot of the questions you've answered, what you're up against, so to speak, but there's been a few things in there that I've learned as well, which is interesting, because it's a very complex industry to navigate. let alone from the import-export angle. So yeah, no, thank you. I guess from that perspective, we've been asking you questions, but is there something that, you talk about new strains, what else does the future hold for you guys, and is there anything you'd like to discuss with this opportunity, I suppose?
Yeah, so we love patient feedback at Medcan. So we're very active. We try to be active on socials. We're in a number of the different Discords. We're on Reddit. We try to interact as much as possible. We encourage patients to give us feedback. In fact, we've, I think, gone live. We haven't announced it, but on our website we've now got like a feedback survey that we've put out for our product. So if a patient wants to give us their feedback, it's like a really nice survey that we've come up with actual questions about, okay, did you enjoy the product? What were the effects like? So it's something that patients can feel that they can actually give us real beneficial feedback on the product.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. So we really encourage people to reach out to us, and obviously on socials there's a different feel, and but we always encourage people to come reach out directly, speak to us.
Yeah.
We're nice people.
Yeah.
We love hearing feedback from patients, whether good, whether bad, things we can improve on. That's sort of, yeah, that's the one thing. Is there anything else? No, we encourage patients to let us know their feelings, to let us know what they're after. You ask what else is in store for Medcan. So for the last 3-4 years we've been a cultivator, we've been cultivating flower. We are starting to look further down the line, perhaps, and say, okay, we've got all of this leftover trim that we've done nothing with, right? So for the last 3-4 years Medcan's been freezing the trim, because you can freeze it and then sort of maintain to some degree the quality of what's inside. And so we are looking at doing something with our trim, perhaps an oil, perhaps something else with the product that would complement the Hacienda flower. So it would be made from the strain and the phenos that we've got, just a different sort of form of it.
Yeah. But Cox were turning earlier when you were saying something else. I was like, I wonder if that's what they'd be doing.
Yeah, but again, you're in a regulated industry, so in order to do that, you either need to apply for a different license and buy really expensive equipment, or you need to find someone else that has the license that can contract manufacture. And so it's taken time for us to sort of work out, do we want to do this ourselves? Can we find a third party that we can sort of contract with and then have them do it? Are they regulated? Do they have the relevant licenses? Like all of these things are what makes it difficult. But we think we found a good partner.
Oh, great.
And so that might be something that hopefully patients see down the line. You could get the flower, you could get the oil, you could get a full Medcan prescription.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, and obviously it is a shame if you won't, because there is all that readily available, byproduct that you can recycle it in other ways. But why not continue to use that as medicines? That's exciting. I look forward to seeing that.
That's us, yeah.
I think that covers everything. I really appreciate your time.
Great.
Just taking some time out of this and just going back to that kind of patient interaction. That has been my experience. I think we were on a holiday and I got a message out of the blue from your team saying thanks about the review that we wrote. And the feedback in that message alone was great, because it just showed that it's attention to detail beyond the grow room. It's, seeing what people are saying and kind of having that feedback loop so it's not lost. It's been great, and ever since then, every now and again they'll pop into the DMs and check in and see everything's alright, and I'm glad. I think it was March or something we first suggested this, so it's great.
Yeah, it's good.
We've had a crazy year, but I'm glad that we managed to fix this up, so thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for coming down.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.